Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for this Eureka, Module 7, Angles lesson. Let's go talk geometry. A very simple real life application for considering angles is considering a microscope. When you look through a microscope, you see a slide through a perspective which looks like this. We'll call this perspective 360 degrees. That 360 degrees represents the entire, meaning 100% of that circle. So 100% of the circle is 360 degrees. That means half of the circle, if we draw a line through it, half of the circle is 180 degrees. So this represents 180 degrees, and this represents 180 degrees on the bottom. You put them together, you get 360 degrees. So 50% represents 180 degrees. So again, that's where we get the flat line rule. A straight line is 180 degrees on the top and 180 degrees on the bottom. So it's 360 degrees when it's looked at as a circle, but it's 180 degrees when it's considered a line. Now, if you take a straight line and you tilt it sideways, it still represents 180 degrees. That's where the flat line rule comes into play in geometry. We're just taking a flat line and we're tilting it. Where does this happen? Well, in the real world, you may consider this happening in airplane gauges, right? When you see on the movies the airplane gauges shift, well, it has to shift in perspective of what? Of level. Level in relationship to gravity, okay? It's not going to change. The center of the earth is always going to be the center of the earth. So if I flip your straight line sideways, that's level in terms of gravity, as I was talking about. So if I flip your straight line sideways, level is still level. So that change from here, from original to here, can be thought of as an angle, a change in space. Now, let's look at the problem. We have, let's call it position 1 on the airplane gauge to position 2 on the airplane gauge, like we just described. What's the change space? We call the change space an angle. So if we start at 180 to begin with, then when we end, the new position still has to be 180, right? Yeah. So as far as question number 1, you can think of it a couple of ways. Stay with me, okay? Let's think of it in terms of the easiest way, which is the flat line rule. We know this flat line is 180 degrees. So we know this flat line is 180 degrees. So if this is 110, this has to be 70. So y can be thought of as 70. There's another way to look at it. We know that from here to here is position 1, but from here to here is position 2. Sorry, from here to here is position 1, from here to here is position 2. So we know it's a flat line and it's shifted. So it went from here to here. So this space has to be the same as that space because it's the same line. So if this is 110, this is 110. So x is 110. Another way to think of it is the flat line rule. And in the flat line rule, we know that from here to here, well, think of it in terms of the flat line rule in relationship, think of it in terms of the flat line rule in relationship to a shift. So if this is 110, that has to be 110. This is also called the vertical angle rule, by the way. Vertical angle rule. The vertical angle rule says that if you have two spaces or two lines that intersect, this angle A and angle B are equal. Okay, so this and angle C and angle D are equal. So the angles that are across from each other are equal. That's one way to know it, as the vertical angle rule. But you could also know it in terms of, think about it as a shift and a change in space. Like I said, this is position 1, shifted position 2. So we know it's the same line, right? Around the same axis. That means this has to be this in the new configuration. So if this is 110, this is also 110. So we know x is 110. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says find y. Well, I showed you up here using the flat line rule that if this is 110, this has to be 70, right? Because this whole thing, remember, is 180. Correct? So if this whole thing is 180 and this is 110, this has to be 180 minus 110, which is 70 degrees. So y equals 70. Right? So another way to look at it is, if this is 110 and this is 110, another way to look at it is, this is a flat line here, this is 110, right? So if this is 110 and this whole line is 180, this has to be what? 70. And if this is 70 and we just shifted to a new position, or from here to here, then this position has to represent this space, which is 70 degrees. I think that's a very thorough understanding when you think about it in terms of shifting from an original axis. And again, if you want to learn more about this, because my conceptual visual perspective is a little confusing, just look up vertical angle rule online, and also look up flat line rule, I guess you could call it. Flat line rule equal 180. Okay, so that's what you can find online. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that's helpful. Good job. Let's do some more great work. Thank you.